Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality in a way that is extremely empowering. Speaking of exploring powerful perspectives, I'm super excited to announce the release of my very first book, The Golden Key: Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance. If you're ready to alchemize the circumstances in your life so that your abundance expands to an entirely new level in 2021, head over to goldenkey.gift to download the audio or ebook as my gift to you by using the code POSITIVEHEAD.
Hey, what's up, Unbroken Nation? Hope that you're doing well wherever you are in the world today. Super excited to be joined by my guest, Brandon Beacham, who is an entrepreneur, thought leader, author, and host of the Positive Head podcast. Brandon, my friend, how are you? What is going on in your world?
Oh, man. You know, I'm coming off a conversation with some really cool synchronicity. So when you ask what's going on in my world, I'm feeling inspired by synchronicity at this moment.
I love that. That's beautiful. I love when synchronicity happens because it means you're in the right place. It means you are where you are supposed to be. Before we dive in and we get started here, tell everybody a little bit about you, your background, and kind of how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I grew up on the East Coast in Virginia. I currently reside in Los Angeles, California. And what's relevant to share? Serial entrepreneur my whole life, and started, was raised very conservative Christian. And that, really came to, I guess, I was shown these sort of ideas about my spirituality, learned, in church and from the people around me, and ended up going to a Christian school. And soon after I got kicked out of that Christian school for being a bad kid, which translates to just a normal kid, I met someone who had some intuitive abilities. And this really shook me, to the core, because I saw them. Well, first they made some claims about their intuitive abilities, and then they did some things that sort of validated that. And it really led me to start exploring outside of what I was just sort of spoon-fed as far as, more traditional religious, belief system. And that's where things really opened up for me in my life. That was my early 20s. And I started reading, at the time, this is like the mid to late 90s. And so I started reading, books on consciousness and the ultimate nature of reality and things like this. And, I can only assume, because it is my dharmic path to, talk about this, consciousness and the ultimate nature of reality on my show, and to anyone, your show, and anyone who will listen, that as soon as I started reading a lot of the perspectives on, the oneness of all things, and that we're human beings we're not human beings trying to have a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And it just kind of clicked for me, like, oh my gosh, of course this is how it's structured. How is everyone not seeing this? How is everyone not geeking out on this? And so I would talk to anyone who would listen. At the time, this is pre-social media, and so it's not like I was connected to a lot of other people thinking in these ways. At that time, it was like I had books, and I didn't know the authors or have contact to the authors. So I just got lit up about the topic. And so I would talk to anyone who would listen until their ears bled, and they'd either think, that's interesting, and go about their daily life kind of as normal, or, wow, you're crazy, what are you smoking? And that was my journey for a long time. And then, it's one thing to understand, that we are all one with the source consciousness that creates and animates all things. We are all fractals of that source consciousness. And this, and extensions of each other, in a sense, like, there's only one of us in the room, ultimately, I believe. And so it's one thing to understand that theoretically, and it's another thing to apply it to your life in a way that is meaningful and it's like you can understand some of these ideas at a high level, and then you get thrown into real life, and it's kind of like Mike Tyson says, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. So for a long time, it was understanding these things, and then having a lot of challenges that sort of threw me off my game, not acting as the enlightened master I'd hoped to become, and as trials and tribulations came my way. And so that's been a long part of my journey, is just getting my sea legs. I like to say, smooth seas never made for a skilled sailor, and we all came to be skilled sailors. So a lot of really working on myself and getting better and better at showing up the way I envisioned. And so, yeah, that was my journey for a long time, using a lot of the ideas to, have a great hero's journey story of creating Inc. fastest growing private company from my friend's couch, using these ideas about my power and power that we all have access to, unlimited abundance that we all have access to. So had that journey in 2015, an Inc. fastest growing private company. And, then started my podcast, Positive Head. And, that has done really well. It's been, highly revered, I suppose, and has helped a lot of people to with their own awakening journey. And now I just continue, wrote a book, and, continue to just find ways to help to wake up the planet as I wake myself up, and have fun doing it.
Yeah, I love that, and it's a big stretch from getting kicked out of school, right? And I recognize a lot of that in parallel with my own journey, and looking at wanting to make and create impact in the world, despite coming from this place where initially I just wanted to burn it all down. Like, that's probably the most simplified way that I could put it. Is I just looked at the world, I said, I don't like this, so I'm going to destroy it. And then I understood something really important. It's very much in alignment with what Gandhi said, and that's be the change you want to see in the world. And I thought to myself, who am I to complain when I'm not doing shit about this? You know what I mean?
Yep.
One of the things that I'm really curious about in your journey is, I think it's interesting to have these pivotal moments in our lives in which we are laid with something in front of us that gives us the opportunity to tap into it, to leverage it, to absorb it, to bring it a part of us, and to use that then to make life what we have the potential to make it. And that very much being about this crossroads and tapping into it or not tapping into it. And so in your journey, and going back to kind of the beginning of this, there are people that will step into anything outside the realm of what we consider to deem normal as a farce or far-fetched. And yet I have found in my own personal journey, a lot of the spiritual practices that I've brought in, and my understandings and the way I've shifted the way I look at and think about the world, have projected me forward in a way that I never could imagine, because I'm the most anti-woo-woo guy there is, until I started to understand something, that it's not necessarily woo-woo when you experience these things in practicality. But that forced me to kind of force myself into it. Long question short, being faced with this precipice of learning and absorbing these new things, how did you actually allow yourself the space to tap into that without being judgmental? Or were you judgmental and eventually it just kind of happened? Like, what was that like?
That's a great question. I had a bunch of things happen along the way that helped me. For one, I'm maybe a little more open in a naive way, you might say, than the average person. You were probably more skeptical than I was, for example, from what I'm picking up. Or I just had Paul Selig on my show a couple days ago, and I don't know if you know who he is. He's a channel who definitely an interesting guy as a channel. He's grown a lot in popularity. He was went to Yale, professor at NYU, very from New York, very like no woo-woo kind of vibe about him. And yet he's channeling, and he's like, I didn't believe in any of this stuff till it started happening to me. And just very down to earth guy, and doing this very, mystical kind of thing. And I believe that all of this stuff, this woo-woo stuff, is just science that we've yet to understand. It's two sides of the same coin, spirituality and science. And, what I found is, so for me, I saw some things, that really had me scratching my head. I remember going to my brother early on, who we're very close. He's 2 years younger than me. I was telling him, "Oh my gosh, I'm reading these books, and one of the first things I read was a book about astral projection or out of body experience." And I was telling him, "I'm reading this book, and all these people claim that they can leave their bodies either through meditation or becoming lucid in their dreams. Wake up in your dream and say, okay, I want to leave my body, and that's what this book is claiming." And I'm telling him about it, and I remember him. He is still very much entrenched in the religious sort of dogma that we had been raised to believe. And he's like, "Yeah, what are you smoking, dude? People can't leave their body. That's crazy." Although that lucid dreaming thing where you wake up in your dream, that I recognize that. I used to do that as a kid. And so I said, "Well, cool. If it ever happens again, say you want to leave your body and see what happens." Well, by talking about it, it triggered it happening to him again. So he went from one day making fun of me for believing the possibility of having an out of body experience to the next day looking like he'd seen a ghost because he had a lucid dream. He did what I recommended, and he left his body, and it was very profound and, intense. So, I saw things like that, or I just started having some wild things, that happened that supported it for me. I remember reading one of the first books was this person who claimed to be able to psychically tune into animals and communicate with them. And I thought, wow. And I'm in this state of heightened potential belief and excitement. And that childlike wonder, I think, is really a lot of where the magic comes in. And, even the Bible, I don't quote the Bible much, but when I do, it's the verse, "Lest you become like a child, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven." And so I was in this state, I just read this book, and I thought, wow, someone could communicate with animals and it reacts, and, the consciousnesses merge. Wow, fascinating. And then I step into my room, and at the time I lived in a 6-bedroom house in Nashville with 6 people. And I had the master, so it was a big house, and I had the biggest room. And in the far corner, probably 20 feet away from me, there was a moth flying in the corner. And I thought, well, if this guy in the book can do it, and it's true, let me try it. And I held my hands out and said, "Moth, come land in my hand." It instantly flew across the room and landed in the palm of my hand. Now, I've tried it 20 times since, never has worked again. But in that moment, I believe Spirit was showing me, hey, this is real. There is, when you're in the right state, you can tap in. And so I started seeing things like this, that help to solidify my belief. This is how things are structured. Even with, my company Resort Share, as an example, I was living on my friend's couch. I had just failed at an entrepreneurial venture from, standard perspectives. And by anyone's society standards, I was, 30 something years old and living on my friend's couch. I was not a success. However, I knew and believed so wholeheartedly in my divinity that it's like, look, I can manifest more abundance. It's just getting my chops down, getting better at this. And I was able, and I believe results speak for themselves. I went from that belief when all things pointed to the contrary to, within years, having 100 plus employees, achieving what 1 in 10,000 entrepreneurs achieve as far as, annual revenue, doing 10 million plus a year in revenue. It's like, okay, so, what are the results the ideas are getting me? And that's really where I think, what fruit does it yield is really the greatest question.
Yeah, and I love that. And as an entrepreneur, and I've had many entrepreneurs on this show, because as an entrepreneur, I think it's in part kind of the crux of discovering who you are. And I've been an entrepreneur since I was a child, and learning how to effectively hustle for survival, and then measuring immense and gigantic failures time and time again, to getting to that position where, much like you, I mean, I go back to 2016 and I had to borrow money to pay my rent. You know what I mean? Because I was like, it was just failure, failure, failure. And then now I look at my life and I go, man, I have employees. I'm creating livelihood for people. I've done this again and again and again with multiple different businesses. But there's something I want to touch on here, Brandon, because I think it's really important, whereas most people will skip over it. You can sit and you can visualize and you can create in your mind and manifest as much as you want all day long the life that you want to have. But I still believe it requires a tremendous amount of work and effort and energy, Would you agree with that? Because I don't want people just to hear you go, he thought about it and
Yeah.
suddenly he had this $10 million business Inc. 500. But, talk to me about the practical side of creating the life that you want to have while also navigating through the creating the life that you want to have in your mind.
I love that question. And I talk about this in detail in my new book, The Golden Key, which, I'd love to gift to the audience, the audio and or ebook. The key word in law of attraction, action. And so learning, it's not just about sitting Indian style in the corner and, sending distance Reiki to create something. I'm definitely a doer, but so that comes very naturally to me and probably to you, it sounds like, but it's about finding that balance of, how do we manifest the stew of manifestation. There's a lot of ingredients that go into that, and that's something that I talk about in my book. And I think learning how to really follow your own inner excitement and knowing when it's time to act and when it's not. And, up until recently, I've had the biggest spell of not sure how I wanted to direct my energy. And I took that as an opportunity. Instead of in the past, I would just throw myself into something. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to wait. I'm going to follow the signs. I'm going to allow for what is my always tuning into myself. Am I feeling inspired to follow this breadcrumb? And if it is, if I'm inspired, that is an indicator that there's something for me there. Now, it might not take me all the way to the promised land. I may even go down a path that comes to a dead end at some point, but there's something I needed to learn on that journey. And if I learn to tap into knowing that what's right for me, what I'm seeking is seeking me, and what keeps it at bay is me trying to ever force something. Or, here's the thing is when you're following a path that's for you, you're lit up about it. You're going to find excitement in yourself about it. There's going to be, and then the work, what is the saying? Do something you love and you never work a day in your life. I believe that path is there for all of us. It's finding it, and it doesn't mean it's never going to be hard or challenging or any of those things. But once again, smooth seas never made for a skilled sailor, and you came to be a skilled sailor. So knowing you didn't just come here for it to be all roses, rainbows, and butterflies. Your soul wants that hero's journey tale. It's why every great movie, like Star Wars, for example, is rooted in the hero's journey tale, because that is our journey as a species, as a society. That is mankind's core journey, I believe. And so learning to be aware and tapping into yourself and getting sensitive to, how am I feeling about this? Am I feeling inspired? Okay, I'm not feeling inspired to go that direction. What am I feeling inspired to do? How can is this a time for rest? Okay, let me honor that. Sometimes the most useful thing you can do is to sit back and rest and allow some time to pass. And so it is a dance. It's like, it really takes getting tuned into the subtle energies, and that takes time for all of us to get better at, more adept at. And I think experience and awareness, helps with that.
I love that you said it's like a dance. It's such a great way to phrase that, because I think you're spot on. So much of this is about the back and forth, the ebb and the flow, the finding the rhythm, not even necessarily as like an entrepreneur or business owner, but as a human being in your
Yep.
healing journey, in your growth journey.
Yep.
I think I was speaking to one of my clients the other day, and I was like, we're canceling your session next week. You need a break. You need a break from healing. I can see it, I can hear it, I can feel like you need, and myself too. I'm like, if I need a break, I honor it. Brandon, one of the things that I'm curious about though is when, especially in the scope of understanding society is about work more, work faster, work harder, more diligently, sleep when you're dead. How do you get into this place where you start to listen to yourself when you have these big, grandiose goals, ideas, dreams that you want to bring into fruition, but you hear all this input from society saying, no, if you sleep, somebody's going to do it faster than you. How do you navigate that conversation with yourself?
Yeah, that's a challenging one, and especially for someone who's so driven and motivated, and it's just, I think wisdom, time. It's like maturity and wisdom, and these things come with time. It's like, I've I've pushed myself so hard at times where it's like, this isn't fun anymore. And if you realize that, hey, it's meant to be, once again, doesn't mean it won't be challenging, but you're meant to have a journey that is rewarding. And if I'm burning myself out, it's like you start to understand that, a lot of these ideas about the ultimate nature of reality, the illusory nature of time, it's why you have someone like, I believe it's Osho, that said everyone should meditate at least 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, you should meditate for an hour. And it's like, that's speaking to this sort of thing. Like, do you understand the most useful thing you could possibly do? If it's all energy, from what state am I creating? Because if you want to know the outcome of whatever you're cooking up, look at the ingredients you put in. If I cooked up my next experience with stress, anxiety, foul intention, maybe if I'm not tapped into, I'm going to get out what I put in. One time, my brother, actually, who's, the one I mentioned earlier, very sensitive. He's had a lot of out of body experience type dreams and things since, and he's not really seeking it. And one time he had a visitation dream from our deceased grandmother. And he took his opportunity at that moment to sort of, this is years and years ago, we had a band and he was very curious about our next level of making it, right? And so he decided to sort of speak to her and get her oracle advice, I'm connecting with my grandmother in the dream state. This is really vivid. What's going to happen with the band? And she said something profound that I've always has stuck with me. She goes, you're going to get out of it exactly what you put into it. So if you understand that's how everything works, from which state am I cooking up an experience? Is it coming from stress, anxiety, fear of loss, all of those things? Then guess what? You're gonna probably get that a combination of those things. I can look at my last company, Resort Share, that I mentioned. I had the vision that I could manifest this thing with like lots of financial abundance, and I called that in. I also had a fear of someone trying to take from me, and then I had that experience with it. I've now outgrown that, but at the time, I can look back in retrospect and say, I created all parts of my vibrational offering. So that's why I always say, our number one job is to manage our vibration, because everything comes from that. There is no out there. It is out there is showing up as a reflection of your vibrational offering.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think about this a lot, and I'd love to get your thoughts. And it's like this: what you think becomes what you speak become your actions, and your actions become your reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the energy that I put into everything that I do in my life, and trying to understand and navigate the power of those thoughts. And coming from this place where my background is full of anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations, like I've had those experiences. And then almost in a sense, and this is what I'm curious about from your perspective, almost in a sense, force feeding myself the opposite, almost ad nauseum of what my brain is telling me to change that story.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about fear, and fear is such, my God, it is a catalyst that I think about in my life that is either just this driver or this brake. And so, can you talk about in your own experiences and how you navigate the world, your thoughts about literally navigating fear and what you do in trying to create this proclamation to yourself of, I
Mm-hmm.
believe I can create abundance, while simultaneously understanding, damn, dude, I just failed my last business. Like, how do
Yep.
you do that?
Yeah, great question. So, in my new book, The Golden Key, I lay out 8 keys, and one of them is to trust the mystery. And so once you start to understand that you're my human and my human level of consciousness, it has its own ideas about what's best for me, where I want to go next, and all those things. And I understand that I'm part of a bigger narrative that my soul is playing out, right? And so it's a dance between my human and my higher self as to what is being created. There's some level, I believe, of choice that I get. There's some things that I think are hard coded in as part of this avatar's, experience. So I think of it like this: I'm playing checkers with my level of awareness, my higher self is playing chess. So it's seeing things from a perspective that I haven't seen the whole board. So I can set my intentions. A lot of people say expectation is the enemy. I don't believe that at all. Expectation and desire is necessary and a positive thing. It's our attachment to it that's the problem. When I tell the idea that this needs to happen in order for me to be happy or fulfilled or successful, that's where I'm slipping. I can set my intentions and my expectations with a healthy sense of detachment, knowing I'm going to trust the mystery. Whatever comes is exactly what I need to become the next greatest and grandest version of myself. I'm going to get the tools along the way that I need to pick up in order to become what I'm meant to become next. I trust that it's all happening for my good and growth, even if it's painful, even if it's not what I would have chosen from my level of awareness as a human. So, what I basically would say is, once you surrender to that process, now things are going to come up that you mentioned fear, that are sometimes scary. Well, guess what? If it scares you and it excites you, I believe it's probably for you, right? Fear can mean two things: forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. So this growth happens on that precipice of fear. And if you can, trust the process, trust you're never going to be given more that you can handle, that it's all happening for your good and growth. And, the 13-year-old laying in bed with growing pains, it wouldn't say, never mind, I want to remain, 4'5". I don't want to grow into a full grown adult. There's a cost, right? And so understanding that, it allows you to have a healthy sense of detachment, knowing that I came to be brave and bold and face fears and step out onto the edge. And once you can at least know and apply this perspective to all of the challenges that life brings your way, it gives you a certain sense of comfort and courage that, allows you to then go into the next key in my book, After Trust and Mystery, is love what comes. Hey, I may not have chosen this, but I'm going to love it. And that is the superpower. That's how I take the lump of coal and transmute it into a diamond. Behind it, I can't maybe see it now, but I trust this is the process that's happening. So as Eckhart Tolle said, can I be the space for this? And the more I can be the space for a challenge, the bigger I become. And the more, like this picture behind me, the deeper the roots go. The higher the branches, the deeper the roots. And, you've got to be planted as a seed in the dark sometimes in order to have that growth that you actually want to experience.
I tell people all the time, if you want to see the light, you're going to have to walk through the darkness.
Yep.
And
you've never seen a work of art, a great work of art, without shadow in it.
Yeah, 100%. There's always going to be, that's the dance, right? That's the ebb and flow of it, where you're looking at and measuring life. Like I think about this all the time. There is a tunnel that's called fear. But this as well as anything, that at the end of that tunnel, there will be light.
Yep.
But you're not going to see that light without going through that tunnel. And then here's the really interesting part about it. Every time you go through that tunnel, you'll be in the light for a moment, and then there will be another tunnel.
Yep.
And that's how life works. I don't know of anyone who ever has not experienced a great amount of fear in this journey.
Yep.
I don't know how that works otherwise. And part of it natively, I think we call into our life, but part of it is just the existence. Like, none of us predicted we'd be sitting here having this conversation after, way too long in lockdown because of something that was unpredictable. And yet Here we are. And so you're faced with this choice. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to continue to live your life? And I think what happens often is people get stuck in, well, the universe is telling me maybe I shouldn't be doing anything because look what's happening around me. How do you fight the current in this, right? You briefly touched on it, but I want to go a little bit deeper because I think there's some practical ways to talk about this. How do you fight the current of, for lack of a better term, getting in your own way because you're allowing the byproduct of the world around you to influence your decision making?
Yeah, great question. So one of the biggest challenges on this journey is we start becoming self-aware. We start becoming aware of these ultimate truths, I believe, as to the nature of the situation in which we find ourselves as human beings. And so we start to understand a little bit more about the game we are immersed in and the game that our soul is playing through our avatar. And then what happens is you get it's like the video game. It's like a video game where, as you level up, you get okay, I'm going to stretch you, and the next boss at the end of the level may be really challenging, and you may fall. It's like you said earlier, it's a dance. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. This idea that our evolution is a spiral, and we circle back on things that we think we have already passed it for even more. We're like layers of an onion, our development. And sometimes we come back to things for further clarification and release and processing. And so sometimes that entails slipping and like, oh gosh, I took all these steps forward and now I'm retracting. I just failed. And here's the real challenge with that. What happens is then we're aware of our slippage, and then self-judgment becomes the biggest adversary in the room, because now we're judging our process and this self-deprecation, and I'm a loser and I can do better and I knew better and I still failed. And there's nothing good that comes from that. Like when I say love what comes, love what comes. Love yourself there. Love yourself where you're at, because when you're resistant to something or judging something, it's a testament to your level of ignorance about the process in which you're involved in. And so, by loving and saying, okay, I slipped, I fell off the wagon, but every moment is another chance to turn it all around. My spirit has infinite chances. You're going to just continue. What really inspires me is whenever I fail, like let's say in my case, being reactive to someone who's the universe will send me absurd, from time to time. It's like, this person's perspective is completely absurd and unfair. And don't they know how right I am, and like how wrong they are, and how out of alignment with the truth they are? How dare they? And then it turns into this reactiveness to it. And then it's like, and then if I slipped into that reactiveness, then it's like, oh, Brandon, you slipped. You failed the test. You took the carrot. And then it's like, oh, I know I'm going to the universe is going to give me another opportunity to face irrational logic, because that's my weak point, So my motivation comes from, okay, I don't need to beat myself up. I'm growing, and I just know, my motivation is I don't want to repeat this. So get it right. And then when you do get it right, man, it feels great. It's like, oh my gosh, I just proacted instead of reacted in a situation that many times before I would have, reacted, and as a result, not navigated things to their highest potential by showing up as my greatest and greatest self, regardless of how someone else is showing up and how illogical they're maybe being in that moment. So I think that's a big one, Michael, on this path is, really loving yourself in the process. And when you quote unquote fail, understand that it's really, you're always going to get another chance. It's really all it is how quickly do you want to move through the process? And the better you navigate, the quicker you're going to level up. But like you said, every new plateau leads you to another vista of opportunity for growth. And here's a new cave. So, and this is the journey we're taking to becoming more of our divine, self. And it's the God self that we're a part of. It is vast. So no matter how far you go, it is infinitely large. And so there's going to be ever more in front of it to grow and expand, which is hard for our minds to wrap around. But I truly believe, like, you're in the dance, and the journey is the goal. So just relax about it and go easy on yourself most of all.
Yeah, I love that. And, I think many people, and myself included, for a long time, just the words I use of myself were so crass, so hard, so dark. And, I would use words that if I said to another human being would probably get me punched in the face.
Right.
And I thought about that, and I made this massive shift in the language that I was using for myself, because it was like this spilled milk thing, right? Where, you spill the glass and you just destroy yourself. And I'm like, dude, it's fucking milk. It's fine. It's fine. And I started to apply that to everything. And then one of the things that I discovered in applying that in a very practical way became this thing about giving myself grace around the mistakes that I was making, recognizing what you just said. On a long enough timeline, you're actually going to be presented with the same exact challenge and opportunity that you once prior failed to now be able to succeed through. One of the things I'm curious about, and I'm going to use language that you didn't use, but I want to see if we can narrow this down a little bit into perhaps a more simplified way. Is part of this journey about letting go?
Mm,
What
yeah.
is that like? Because
Yeah.
the words I hear when you say this, I'm just like, I hear just let it fucking go, man.
Yep. 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 Absolutely. Surrender is crucial. It's like, think of it like, you are this wave in an infinite ocean. And whenever you know, I'm whenever I'm fighting or resisting anything that's happening, I'm literally, or think of it like a stream. I'm turning and I'm trying to swim upstream. And how exhausting is it if the stream's going one way, I'm going another? You're getting beaten against the rocks, you're wearing yourself out. If I instead look at it as like, oh, I want to be a soul surfer. I want to learn how to, I think it's Charles Bukowski who said, all that matters is how gracefully we walk through the fire. And so I want to learn to just like the challenges are never going to end. And the upside of passing those are always going to come, and there's going to be the redemption and the reward, and then more challenge, and then reward, and then and it's like that's the dance. So if I'm resisting every time the challenge comes, that's showing that I don't understand the process in which I'm engaged. And so letting go, learning to surrender, it's huge because now you can actually gracefully navigate and surf your existence as opposed to, just wrecking yourself on the rocks and wearing yourself out swimming upstream. Just, Abraham Hicks talks about this. Just stopping the fight allows you to go naturally with the current. You don't even have to do much. Just stop resisting what is. Can I be the space for this? How do I love what's here? That's the pathway to move through it. If you don't want it, don't resist it. What you resist persists. They asked Mother Teresa, she understood this. They asked her in the war in Vietnam, they were going to do like a 1 million man march, and they wanted her to be a big part of it. And they asked her, will you come and be, an icon for this, marching against the war in Vietnam? She said, I'll never do that, but have a march for peace and I'll be there. Because she understood what you resist persists. What you give energy to, you create more of because you are a creator. They asked Mario Andretti, the greatest race car driver of all time, what's the number one thing you tell new drivers? What's the number one piece of advice? He said, don't look at the wall. You know why? Where attention goes, energy flows, right? So stop resisting. Don't give attention to what you don't want. Be for something and against nothing. And that is how you're most gracefully going to float through all. And then you get into the groove of, oh, I just caught a wave. Oh, I just caught another wave. Oh, it's a little bumpy, but I caught another wave. Oh, wow, this feels much smoother. And that's what we're learning to do.
That's beautiful. I love those analogies. And I love those quirks there because I mean, that's so much about life, right? I think about every time I've really tried to push upstream, it's like at some point I just quit. I'm like, I don't know
Yep.
why I'm doing this. This makes no sense.
Yep.
And more so it's led to this place where ultimately I think it helps, for lack of a better term, it helps create your demise. Whereas suddenly you're looking at it and you're like, I've imploded everything around me.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard because we don't want to let go. I mean, even this includes some of my dreams, right? Like even things I really wanted to create and manifest. Sometimes I have to look at it and go, actually, it's not really what I want.
Yeah.
Why am I fighting this? Why am I pushing so hard to bring something to fruition that actually I don't want?
Yep.
And I think so much about this journey about honoring yourself, right? And look at the scale in which you have changed your life by honoring these little bits and pieces and moments of this journey that have led you to where you are today. One of the things, and I'm curious about your thoughts are, how do you really honor that part of yourself, right? When you're in this place where you think about your background, you think about the past, you think about all the things in life that you coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? That whole thing, that conversation we're always having in our head. Is there something practical to
Mm,
honoring your intuition in the
mm,
moment that it shows
mm,
up?
mm. Yeah. You know, here's a great Krishnamurti, I believe, said, "You want to know what my secret is? You see, I don't mind what happens." And it's like, wow. Like, imagine getting into a place where you just don't mind what happens. You're so trusting of your life and the flow of your life that, yes, you have ideas. Yes, you take action. And I also know that source, God, higher self, the universe, whatever you want to call it, is perfectly imperfect. So there's never been a mistake in all of eternity, I believe. I believe there's never been a victim in all of eternity. And that's a tough one for people. And I understand why. But I believe it is this perfectly woven web where everyone is getting exactly what they need to become the next greatest and grandest version of themselves. And at some level, their soul has signed a contract, essentially, in order to co-create that with other characters and players. So that is, once you come to that conclusion or reality, or you try that perspective on for size, it really brings a sense of relief about, about how everything's unfolding. And now I'm just going to learn to tap in, like you said, to my intuition. Yeah, this is a sense that we all have that maybe has been underdeveloped because we've been so lost in the mind space, when really the vehicle that's meant to drive us is our heart. Our heart actually sends twice as many signals to the brain as the brain does to the heart. There's actual brain cells in the heart. So learning to move into that heart space. What am I feeling? What am I feeling about this? What is that more subtle, not all this noise, what I've been told and ideas and thoughts and chasing rabbits, instead, what am I feeling? Okay, I'm going to follow that, and knowing that no matter what I choose, source is like this. It's like, what is one of those toys where you can throw and no matter what, it always stands on its feet, Same kind of thing with source. No matter what happens, you're going to land back on your feet with a new opportunity in front of you. So if you kind of relax about getting it right, you can't get it wrong. It's all divine. It's always going to lead. It's taking different paths to the same destination, and they're all valid, and source wants to experience them all. So, I always say our life plays out at the corner of free will and destiny. That's what's happening. It's like, it's destined because it's all already happened. Einstein has proven time is an illusion. If you shoot me into outer space and bring me back a day later, I'm a day older and you've been dead for 100 years or something like that, right? And then, so it's all already happened. My 5th birthday party is happening on another channel. I'm just not tuned into it in this moment. But free will comes in because from this moment forward, source has many versions of these characters, me and you and those listening. I remember my first intuitive reading, psychic reading. This woman says, "Oh, I see you in a cold place like Chicago in business." My jaw hit the floor because we were in Atlanta, Georgia during this reading. And I was planning to move to Chicago after college and work for my uncle in business. And then she said, "There's this whole other path in California in music." A year later, I ended up forming a band, met someone from California, and here we are. So 20 some years later. So what was she tuning into? The potential Brandons in that moment. So it's destined because it's all already happened, but free will, the question is, which version of you from this moment forward are you going to step into vibrationally? And so my answer to that is, well, we want to be the greatest and grandest version, the one that's the most rewarding. Well, since time's an illusion, source has already been there, done that, and gotten the t-shirt. So you be it to see it. Most people have it backwards. They're doing something like work in order to have something like money, in order to be something like happy, when it actually comes from your state of beingness. You be something like happy, and you find yourself doing and having things that are a reflection of that. It's like there is no out there. Out there is a reflection of your internal state. So you start navigating your reality in this way, and following your intuition, as you mentioned, is a big part of that. Okay, I'm going to follow that guidance. I'm going to make the executive decision and trust whatever comes. And maybe it led me somewhere way different than what I envisioned, and that's okay.
I mean, that's so well said and profound. And I think about infinity theory and black hole theory and things like that we don't have enough time to get into right now. But
Sure.
there's something that is feels so true to me about the idea that if you just trust the process, if you just trust it, that eventually you'll be where you're supposed to be. I'm not
Yep.
saying the process is going to be easy either, because I know
Ain't
for sure
supposed to
that
be.
shit's going to be hard sometimes,
Yep.
right? But I do know on a long enough timeline it can happen. Brandon, this is an amazing conversation, my friend. Before I ask you my last question, can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Sure, sure, yeah. So if you search, of course, my podcast, Positive Head, is anywhere that you get your podcasts. I've been doing that about 6 years, 1,500 episodes. Have a great game that you can play with it, sort of an oracle game to get an episode that would be perfect for you on positivehead.com, called The Game with the Universe, YOU, universe. I also have put out a few episodes of a new late night style consciousness centric talk show. That's video, production, live music, visionary art, interviews. And you can find that at optimistic.tv. And then I'm on social media, and not huge on social media, but you can find me on, all the things if you search my name, Brandon Beecham. So
Amazing, my friend. And my last question for you is, what does it mean to you to be unbroken?
yeah, I think of the Chinese proverb, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. Or the Japanese process of what's it called? It's like kitcha something. I'm going blank exactly, but it's basically where they'll take a piece of pottery that is broken, and then they'll repair it with gold. And they believe it actually is more beautiful than before it being broken. So being unbroken entails understanding that your brokenness, any experience of brokenness, leads to the greater level of understanding and awareness that ultimately you can never be broken, because you're one with the source consciousness that creates and animates all things. You are it. It is you. And it is infinitely resilient. And everything serves its growth and greater good. So every time a broken type experience happens, from that you become stronger and better and more. And so in that way, none of us can ever truly be broken.
I love it, my friend. Thank you so much for being here. Unbroken Nation, thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment, leave a review, tell a friend. And until next time, my friends, be unbroken. I'll see ya.
Also, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you to download the Golden Key audio or ebook as my free gift to you at goldenkey.gift using the Golden Key code POSITIVEHEAD. And please, if you enjoy my gift, leave a positive review on Amazon so others can find the book and unlock their lives with the help of the Golden Key as well.